Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going behind the scenes with the one and only Al Pacino.
A legend.
Yeah, you might think you know him, but we're diving deep into his autobiography.
Oh, wow.
To uncover the man behind all those iconic roles.
I love this idea.
Yeah.
So we're going to look at 3 of his most impactful films.
Okay.
Scarface.
Yeah.
And Justice for All. And Cruising. And through these movies, we'll see how Pacino's experiences, like his personal life, his struggles as an artist,
Yeah.
and even his love life, all shaped his career.
It's amazing how much he opens up in this book.
I know it's really rare to get such an honest look at an actor's process,
Oh.
especially someone as famous as Pacino.
Right, and let's start with Scarface.
Okay.
Now, this film became a total cultural phenomenon, but you might be surprised to learn
What's that?
that Pacino's connection to gangster movies goes way back.
Really?
Yeah, in his autobiography, he talks about his grandfather's fascination with the original Scarface.
The one from 1932?
Yeah, that one. And it turns out his grandpa was obsessed with George Raft.
Oh, yeah, the actor.
Yeah, Raft was a big star back then.
I can see the appeal.
It's almost like these gangster movies were in his blood from childhood.
That's so interesting how those early films, like the original Scarface, shaped Pacino's imagination.
Right.
And then he ends up playing Tony Montana years later.
Yeah, but what really drew him to the remake wasn't just nostalgia.
Oh, I bet.
It was Paul Muni's performance as the original Scarface.
Oh, yeah. Muni was incredible.
Pacino saw this rawness, this fearless quality in Muni's acting that really inspired him.
And you can see that inspiration in Pacino's performance as Tony Montana.
Oh, absolutely.
It's electric.
So intense and captivating.
Totally agree. But what I found really insightful was how Pacino saw Tony.
Yeah.
He saw him as a product of his time.
The 80s, the Reagan era.
Yeah, that whole greed is good mentality.
It's like Scarface was more than just a gangster film.
Exactly. It was a commentary on society.
And the American dream gone wrong.
But the critics didn't really see it that way.
Oh, they hated it.
When it first came out, yeah, it was almost universally panned.
Really? It's hard to imagine Scarface being a flop.
I know, right? But that's exactly what happened.
Wow.
It's a perfect example of how public taste can change over time.
That's so true.
Critics were dismissive, but audiences, especially in the hip-hop community,
Yeah, they loved it.
they embraced it from the start.
They connected with Tony's ambition, his ruthlessness, his outsider status.
And eventually that audience enthusiasm turned Scarface into the cult classic it is today.
It's a testament to the power of word of mouth.
And how a film can really connect with people on a deeper level.
You know, it's funny, though. Even Pacino wasn't immune to those initial bad reviews.
Oh, really?
He talks about being at the premiere party, feeling like he'd let everyone down.
That's got to be tough.
Yeah, it wasn't until years later when the film found its audience that he understood its impact.
I can see that.
And speaking of impact, Pacino's performance as Tony Montana is undeniably iconic.
Well, yeah, no question.
But here's something that really surprised me.
What's that?
He reveals in his book that he sought out knife combat training.
Wait, really?
Not because it was in the script.
So why?
He felt it would give him a deeper understanding of Tony's aggression and control.
That's dedication.
He wanted to embody that physicality, to feel what it was like to move with that power and danger.
And you can tell he put in the work. Every gesture, every little detail feels so authentic.
Exactly. He even had very specific ideas about Tony's look.
Like the scar.
Yeah, he didn't want it to be just a random mark on his face.
So what did he want?
He wanted it to cut through his eyebrow and down into his cheek,
Oh, wow.
symbolizing the chaos and brutality of Tony's life.
It's amazing how those small choices can add so much depth to a character.
And you'll never guess where he was living while preparing for this role.
Where?
A Malibu beach condo.
Malibu for Scarface.
Yeah.
That's a contrast.
Talk about worlds colliding.
But I guess it shows how Pacino could create this intense inner world for Tony
Yeah.
while still keeping a sense of separation from the character.
Right. And while he was immersed in that dark world of Scarface, he was also juggling a pretty demanding stage role.
Oh, yeah. What was he doing?
The play American Buffalo.
Oh, wow.
He was performing off-Broadway and later took it to cities across the U.S. and even London.
That's a busy schedule.
But this wasn't just a paycheck for him.
So what was it about?
He actually negotiated a lower salary so he could limit his performances to 6 nights a week instead of 8.
Why would he do that?
He wanted to have the time and energy to dedicate himself to both Scarface and the play.
He was committed to both projects.
Absolutely. And he even talks about forming a close bond with his co-star Jimmy Hayden during the American Buffalo run.
Oh, yeah. Hayden was a great actor.
Sadly, he was battling addiction at the time.
That's right.
And Pacino describes feeling like a protective older brother trying to help him through those struggles.
That's heartbreaking.
He was devastated when Hayden passed away during the Broadway run.
It's a reminder of the personal costs that come with this kind of career.
Definitely. And, you know, while he was dealing with all of that emotional turmoil, he was also facing a frustrating public perception.
What do you mean?
People assumed he was just doing the play for the money.
But as we've learned, that was far from the truth.
Exactly. He was truly committed to the craft of acting both on stage and on screen.
And that dedication really shines through in this story about a woman who interrupted a performance.
Oh, yeah. What happened?
They were in the middle of a scene about planning a heist when this woman stumbles down the aisle slightly inebriated.
Oh, no.
And asks Pacino for a light.
You're kidding? Can you imagine?
Talk about breaking the fourth wall.
Did they stop the show?
Nope. Pacino and his castmate didn't break character.
Wow.
They stayed in the moment, telling her they were too busy planning a robbery to be bothered.
That's brilliant.
It's a testament to their professionalism and quick thinking.
And their commitment to the live performance.
Absolutely. That shared experience between actor and audience.
Right. But now let's get back to Scarface and how this film, despite its initial rejection, eventually became a cultural phenomenon.
Especially within the hip-hop community.
They really resonated with Tony Montana's ambition, his rise from nothing to the top, that every day above ground is a good day mentality.
It's inspiring in a way.
Right, and you can see how that resonated with artists striving for success in a world that often felt stacked against them.
And, you know, Pacino recognized that connection.
Really?
Years later, he held a 35th anniversary reunion for Scarface at the Beacon Theater in Manhattan.
Wow.
And he invited some of his friends who weren't fans of the movie.
To see it again.
He wanted them to experience it with a live audience, to see how it played in that context.
What did they think?
They were surprised they finally understood why it became such a phenomenon.
The energy of the crowd changed their perspective.
Exactly. The audience's reactions helped them appreciate the humor, the drama, even the nuances they had missed before.
It's fascinating how the collective experience of watching a film can shift our perspectives.
It really can.
And to this day, Scarface remains Pacino's most commercially successful film.
I can believe it.
He even jokes that the residuals from the film,
The ongoing payments he faced.
could support him quite comfortably if he lived a more modest lifestyle.
Wow. Imagine that, living off the legacy of Tony Montana.
It's incredible to think that a film that was so critically panned has become such a lasting part of our culture.
It really is. But, you know, while Scarface might be his most commercially successful film,
Right.
it wasn't the only one that pushed boundaries and sparked controversy.
That's right. Coming up after a quick break, we'll dive into the making of And Justice for All.
A film that saw Pacino clashing with the director over his artistic vision.
It's a story you don't want to miss, so stay tuned.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about Scarface and that whole unexpected journey to becoming a cultural phenomenon.
A total classic.
But, you know, Pacino's career is full of these surprises, these films that maybe didn't get the recognition they deserved right away.
Yeah, like hidden gems.
And Justice for All is a great example.
Oh, yeah, that courtroom drama.
You probably remember that famous line.
Yeah, you're out of order. This whole trial is out of order.
Exactly. It perfectly captures the frustration that Pacino's character, Arthur Kirkland, feels with the whole legal system.
But what's really interesting is that there was a lot of tension behind the scenes.
Right.
Pacino and the director, Norman Jewison, they had some major disagreements about how some scenes should be played.
That's not uncommon in filmmaking.
True. But this was more than just creative differences.
So what happened?
There was one scene in particular that became a real sticking point.
Which one?
It's a pivotal moment where Kirkland visits a judge in jail.
Oh, yeah, I remember that scene.
Pacino felt very strongly that the scene wasn't working.
What was wrong with it?
He felt it lacked emotional depth, that it didn't show Kirkland's inner conflict.
His struggle to reconcile his personal feelings with his duty as a lawyer.
Exactly, and he wanted to reshoot it.
And did they?
He actually got his agent involved to try and convince Jewison.
Wow, that's serious.
It just shows how much Pacino cared about his work, how committed he was to getting it right.
And did it pay off?
They did eventually reshoot the scene, and it became one of the most powerful moments in the film.
It's amazing how these creative clashes, these moments of tension, can sometimes lead to something truly great.
And speaking of tension, let's talk about another Pacino film that really stirred up some controversy.
You mean Cruising?
That's the one this film's set in the underground gay leather scene in New York City.
It was definitely controversial.
It was met with protests and backlash even before it came out.
Yeah, a lot of people in the gay community felt it portrayed them in a negative light.
And looking back, Pacino himself admits that the film was problematic.
He didn't fully grasp the potential harm it could cause.
He says in his book that he received death threats
Well,
and needed bodyguards on set.
that's intense.
The studio even pressured him to say something positive about the film, but he refused.
Right.
He said he had no feelings about it whatsoever.
That's pretty bold considering he was the star.
But it shows how strongly he felt about it.
And as a gesture of his remorse, he donated his entire salary from cruising to charity.
He set up a trust fund to make sure the money was used for good.
That's a powerful statement.
But, the negativity surrounding cruising,
Yeah.
along with some other projects that didn't quite hit the mark, it really started to weigh on him.
I can imagine.
He even talks about feeling himself slipping into obscurity.
That fear of fading from the spotlight, it's something a lot of actors face.
Right, but here's the thing. While he was grappling with all of these professional setbacks, he was also experiencing a really deep personal connection.
What do you mean?
He had fallen head over heels in love with Kathleen Quinlan, the actress.
Oh, wow.
He describes it as love at first sight.
He was totally smitten.
But there was a problem. She had a boyfriend at the time.
Oh, no, a love triangle.
And Pacino is very clear about his stance on that off-limits.
He respected that.
He even talks about seeing her boyfriend peering through a basement window while they were doing a reading of Othello.
Talk about awkward.
But eventually, fate intervened.
What happened?
Quinlan and her boyfriend broke up.
And she and Pacino started dating.
Yeah, they finally got together.
He was completely enamored with her.
Totally. And their relationship became a real source of comfort and stability for him during the filming of Scarface.
It was a haven from all the darkness and intensity of that role.
Exactly, a place where he could just be himself.
And he even says she was the closest he ever came to getting married.
Really?
But ultimately, he couldn't commit.
He just couldn't see how marriage would benefit him.
That's interesting.
It's a glimpse into his personal life, and it shows that even someone as successful as Al Pacino has his vulnerabilities.
And it's those vulnerabilities, those personal experiences, that make his acting so compelling.
So true. They give him a depth and a complexity that really resonates with audiences.
Absolutely.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, from courtroom clashes to controversial films to whirlwind romances.
It's been a journey.
But we haven't even scratched the surface of Scarface.
Oh, there's so much more to explore.
Coming up next, we'll dive deep into Pacino's transformation into Tony Montana.
The challenges of filming that iconic role.
And the film's incredible journey to becoming a cultural touchstone.
Sit with us.
Welcome back. We've been talking about Al Pacino's career, but let's be real. When you think of Pacino,
one role comes to mind.
Tony Montana.
Scarface.
And it's not just fans who get it. Even Pacino himself says that Scarface changed everything for him.
Yeah, he talks about almost walking away from acting before taking on that role.
Wow, really?
He was feeling disillusioned with Hollywood, burned out by creative battles and bad reviews.
You can kind of understand it, right?
Yeah, but then Scarface came along, this larger-than-life gangster.
And it reignited his passion for acting.
You can feel that passion in his performance.
It's electric.
He becomes Tony Montana, that swagger, that explosive anger.
And the accent.
Oh, yeah, the Cuban accent. So good.
But it wasn't just about the accent.
No, he really went deep.
He spent months researching drug lords, working with dialect coaches, even training with a knife combat expert.
To understand Tony's aggression.
Could get into his head, to feel what it was like to move like that.
And you see it all on screen.
Every gesture, every scar tells a story.
He even insisted on having that scar cut through his eyebrow.
Yeah, down into his cheek.
He said it symbolized Tony's inner turmoil.
The violence that shaped him.
It's incredible how much thought he put into it.
It makes the performance so unforgettable.
But filming Scarface wasn't all smooth sailing.
I bet there were challenges.
Big time. They ran into some issues when they started shooting in Miami.
What happened?
Conservative groups were pushing back.
Oh, no.
They were worried about the film's portrayal of Cuban people.
That it would reinforce negative stereotypes?
And fuel anti-immigrant feelings.
There were even rumors of political pressure to shut down the production.
Can you imagine the stress?
Trying to create a film with all that going on.
But they pushed through.
Pacino and the crew.
They managed to finish filming in Miami.
Even with all the headaches.
But those challenges were nothing compared to the critical reception.
When the film came out.
Oh yeah, the critics ripped it apart.
What do they say?
Excessive, violent, shallow, you name it.
It's crazy to think now how iconic the film has become.
But at the time, it was considered a flop.
Pacino even talks about being at the premiere, feeling disappointed, almost embarrassed.
He thought he had failed.
Except for Eddie Murphy.
Oh, yeah, what happened?
Pacino says Murphy was at the premiere and he loved the film.
Really one of the few?
He got it. He understood what Pacino was trying to do.
It's a reminder that even the greatest artists face rejection.
And that taste change.
While the critics were busy panning it, audiences embraced it.
Especially in the hip-hop community.
They saw Tony Montana as a symbol of ambition.
That whole striving for success against all odds.
And Pacino saw that connection too.
You know, years later, he held that 35th anniversary reunion for Scarface.
At the Beacon Theater?
And he invited some of his friends who hadn't liked it at first.
He wanted them to see it with an audience.
Let's feel that energy.
And they were blown away.
They finally understood why it became such a phenomenon.
The collective experience changed their whole perspective.
And that's the thing about Scarface.
It's more than just a film.
It's a cultural touchstone.
You see Tony's face on T-shirts, his lines quoted in songs.
His story keeps coming back in different ways.
It's become part of our language.
And it all started with Pacino's performance.
He created this character who's both terrible and strangely relatable.
A gangster with a heart of gold.
Maybe not gold, but you understand him.
Right. And through Scarface, through all of his work, Pacino shows us that art can be tough.
Controversial even.
But ultimately, it can change us.
So that's it for our deep dive into the world of Al Pacino.
We've seen his struggles, his wins, his personal life, his impact on film.
We've gone behind the mask.
And hopefully this has made you think about the films you watch in a new way.
To see the stories behind the stories.
And to appreciate the power of art.
Remember, Pacino himself said actors are crazy, wild painters who paint characters.
Oh. So next time you see one of his films, think about the passion, the dedication that went into creating those unforgettable performances.
Keep exploring. Keep questioning.